Your Honor, on behalf of Aiden Fucci, we enter a change of plea at this time, entering a guilty plea as charged.
I'm Angenette Levy, and welcome back to Sidebar here on Law and Crime. On the morning that jury selection was to begin in Aiden Fucci's murder trial, he pleads guilty to murdering Tristyn Bailey back in 2021. He now faces the possibility of 40 years in prison to life in prison when he is sentenced. His defense attorney said that all of their plea offers to the prosecution had been rejected. So after Fucci's attorney said that he was changing his plea, the judge in the case conducted a colloquy with Aiden Fucci to make sure he understood what was happening.
All right, sir, if you please state your name.
Aiden Fucci,
Mr. Fucci, how old are you, sir?
16.
How far did you go in school?
To 8th grade?
Are you able to read, write, speak, and understand the English language?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you under the influence of any medication, drugs, or alcohol right now?
Yes, sir, my medication, but
What type of medication are you taking?
Rimron, lithium, and Suprexa.
Is that medication prescribed by a physician?
Yes, sir.
And does that medication assist you in your ability to understand what's happening and going on around you?
Yes, sir.
Have you taken that medication today as prescribed by your physician?
Last night, sir.
Last night, is that when you were scheduled to take it?
Yes, sir.
All right. And is it in any way, shape, or form affecting your ability to understand what's going on here this morning?
No, Your Honor.
Do you feel clear-headed and clear-minded about what's going on here today?
Yes, Your Honor.
Joining me to discuss Aiden Fucci's guilty plea and the evidence in this case, which was overwhelming, is retired homicide detective Fil Waters. He was with the Houston Police Department for 33 years, investigating high-profile cases, and also runs Kindred Spirits investigations. Phil, welcome back to Sidebar. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Angenette. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, you too. Your reaction, just first and foremost, to that guilty plea right there when jury selection was supposed to begin.
I'm not surprised. The evidence that I've looked at, the 12 sheets of evidence that they accumulated in this case, recovered, was amazing. It was irrefutable. There was no way to argue that there was not enough evidence, certainly, and they even recovered the weapon. So I am not surprised. I have had this kind of thing happen before in one of my capital cases where the trial was about to begin. People were about to get up and give testimony, and the person decided the defendant stood up and said, "I want to plead," and that's what they did, and they went right into punishment. So in this particular case in Florida, my sense is they'll now go to sentencing, but it'll probably come from the judge. I know there's a mandatory 40 years, but I can't imagine the judge giving just the mandatory minimum on this case.
And it could be extended to life. I mean, this is a horrific crime. Tristyn Bailey, a 13-year-old girl, a cheerleader, stabbed 114 times. That is overkill, Phil. What does that tell you about Aiden Fucci? Just the fact that you would be able to stab someone 114 times. Stabbing them once or twice takes a lot of force. I can't even imagine.
Well, a guy like this who was predisposed to this, I mean, he had talked about wanting to do something like this, killing somebody, seeing how it felt. So this would be, for me, this would be the distinction that I would make between a sociopath and a psychopath. A sociopath, at least in my world, my simple definition is a person that commits a crime of murder and feels justified in what they did. Now, the distinction between a psychopath is that they commit a sociopathic act, but they enjoy what they're doing. So there's, when you talk about the 114 times that he stabs this girl, this young lady, clearly, for me, he defines himself as a psychopath. He was enjoying what he was doing.
There were knives in this case that are part of the evidence. He actually named his knives Picker and Poker. And there are photographs that the state had obtained of these two knives. So just the fact that he named his knives, it seems like this was very planned, this was premeditated. What does that tell you about naming your murder weapons?
Well, again, that goes to what I just said about the psychopathy of this guy. There is, and I use this term, and I don't use it loosely because I've had some cases where this term was not applied to it, but in this case, this is an act of pure evil. This individual decided that he was wanting to fulfill some need that he had to go out and kill someone. Then when he got to the point where he was decided he was going to do it, he picked the victim. And I would have to believe, I mean, people kill people for one of three motives: it's sex, drugs, or money. I think in this particular case, I noticed in the litany of the listing of all the evidence, they took a sexual assault kit test, and there are some other components there that would suggest that this had a sexual component to it. I don't know that he actually committed the act, but I think that there was a sexual component to this murder, and may have fulfilled some sort of excitement in that area for him.
Hmm. And that's not uncommon. For just because there may not be a sexual assault, it doesn't mean that the perpetrator doesn't get some sort of sexual gratification out of the act. Let's look at a little bit more of the evidence that was seized in this case, or at least collected, I should say, because evidence
Right.
can come in the form of statements as well. One of the officers who took Aiden Fucci into custody said that allegedly he and Tristyn Bailey argued. He pushed her hard to the ground where she hit her head. While sitting in my patrol vehicle, Aiden started to cry and punched the back of the seat, the officer wrote. I asked him if he was okay, and he stated, I'm going to get arrested for this bull, you know what. I did not
Right.
ask him any questions. I stated if he did not do anything, he has nothing to worry about. What do those statements tell you?
Well, from the beginning, those are reus gestae statements. Those are statements that he makes, and he's not asked a question. He's not responding to something. He just makes the statement, and those are critical. I've had those in my cases, and they are the first impression of that person that law enforcement has when they come in contact with them. So that is critical. Those reus gestae statements he's making in the back of the patrol car are significant. And then when you start putting the evidence together, my gosh, they had a treasure trove of evidence. I mean, they had physical evidence, forensic evidence, they've got
Mhm.
trace evidence, they've got digital evidence, they've got videos, they've got reus gestae statements. And then when you tie in the mother washing the clothes, they've got video of her doing that. I mean, you talk about affirmative links. I don't know that I have seen a case, at least in recent history, that had this many affirmative links that kind of close the loop, and you've got the full picture of what happened here in this particular murder.
And we have injuries to Aiden Fucci's body. There are scratches, cuts, obviously defensive wounds where Tristyn Bailey tried to defend herself and sadly uh, was murdered, and she couldn't fight back against him. So those photographs are also important too.
Sure, they are, and it looks like he may have cut to his hand, and that may have been in the midst of the stabbing. I'm telling you, almost every stabbing case that I have worked where there was this volume of stab wounds, the suspect has inadvertently cut themselves, because they're not really, once they start getting into it, especially when you got a guy that's 114 stab wounds, he's not really looking at where he's going with this. So they get the hand out in front of him, and there you go. So, and some of these other injuries, it looked like, may have been from brambles or briars. I mean, he took her off into the woods, and so some of those things look like they may have been caused by some of the landscape.
Mhm. Well, Fil Waters, thank you so much as always for coming on to talk with us about this. We appreciate your time and your expertise as always, and we will be looking forward to that sentencing to see exactly which sentence Aiden Fucci gets.
Thank you, Angenette.
And that's it for this edition of Law and Crime Sidebar Podcast. It is produced by Sam Goldberg and Michael Deininger. Bobby Szoke is our director of YouTube. Alyssa Fisher handles our bookings, and Kiara Bronson does our social media. You can listen to and download Sidebar on Apple, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcast. And of course, you can always watch it on Law and Crime's YouTube channel. I'm Angenette Levy, and we will see you next time.